next segment then looks at supply chain improvements, and we have 3 speakers coming up for this one. They're going to be talking to you and sharing some industry case studies, and that will be followed by a short Q&A then with Clive just after that. So the 3 speakers we have are Josephine McCole, Operations Director at John J. Doyle, Tom McClelland, who we've seen in the video just now, Operations Manager at Sensotech Limited, and then Louise Skeith, CEO of SDG Construction Limited. So if we can welcome Josephine McCole up first, please. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Josephine McCole, and I am Operations Director for John J. Doyle Limited. What is John J. Doyle Limited? We are the UK and Ireland's leading chimney and flue installers. We also have a wholesale distribution department within our company that we supply throughout the island of Ireland on a next-day delivery basis. That wee picture on the left is actually a freestanding chimney at the Royal Victoria Hospital, and the one right beside it, yes, I did go to the top, 40 metres high after handover. So today I'm here to share my supply chain journey and share some of the case studies and the pains and the wins and the joys that we've had along the way. John J. Doyle's is celebrating 96 years in business. We're a third-generation company, and we were established in 1928 by John's grandfather. And we are still all of Ireland and UK's leading refractory engineering company. We have very successfully retained the core skills within our company. You're probably going to say, what is refractory engineering? This is an image of John's father, probably now 50 years ago. And this is the inside of a furnace that we would have successfully relined with high-temperature brick. And we stick to our core family values, which are quality, integrity, and innovation. And we pride ourselves on there's not a chimney problem that we haven't encountered and a chimney solution to the problem that we haven't solved. So I'm here really to tell you about the supply chain. And John J. Doyle's went on a journey probably 10 years ago, and we decided that we would grow the company. And we set out a roadmap, and I have to say, my roadmap was very much like Damien's going that way, and it really did go all over the place. So we grew the business. We had a great growth strategy, and we were good at sales. We brought in the sales, and we successfully grew our company by over 265%. But the thing that we didn't align was our supply chain with the growth strategy. So here's how we operated. Everyone was running around placing orders. You can see very much that we have a commercial department and a domestic wholesale department, both relying on the same supply chain. We had no meaningful controls, and nobody was really held accountable. Stock takes were horrendous. The plan was, in the run-up to Christmas, everybody with down tools would all run about the warehouse, counting stock and looking at items and boxes that maybe nobody had any idea what was in them. There'd be a big bundle of paper, and we'd all go, we're coming back in the new year, and we are going to realign the stock. It's all going to be fine. But sure, we came back in the new year, and we forgot what we did before Christmas. And we had the men out working. We had orders going out the door. So there was never any reliable figures on the system. So it was very, do you have it in stock? Not too sure. And we had zero communication with suppliers. Well, zero quality communication with suppliers. Suppliers we would phone up when we would complain they got the delivery wrong, they got the lead times wrong, all of those issues. So with no meaningful conversations with the suppliers. So given that, we're still growing the company, we're motoring on, and we get an opportunity to take over a business in Dublin, which was just before Brexit. And we thought it would be a good fit to our company. It would fit within our wholesale distribution company. Overnight, that increased our business. It doubled our domestic business. It gave us access to a brand new customer portfolio, and more importantly, it opened up a supply chain that we were never able to get into. So we were now had a supply chain on the other side of the world, which meant we were in the container industry, we were in lead times of 3 months, 4 months, and we also inherited a representative whose responsibility was quality control and to make sure that we delivered what was delivered was what we ordered. So probably a bit mad, we didn't really have an idea of our supply chain. So we took over the company, and then along came the global pandemic, and that was just tested every aspect of the company and tested our supply chain to the brink where it broke part of our processes. There was painful conversations, there was tears, there was frustrations, there was things thrown in the boardroom, and we sat and we watched it and we thought, right, we can't keep going on like this. So the first thing that we did was we decided to change. That was the most important thing. The management team and the senior directors sat down and we decided to change. I still haven't thought of the supply chain. I'm changing the processes, going, right, we need to be more transparent. We need to have visibility of every single stock item that we have. I want to know if it's on the high seas. I want my customers to know when it's coming in. So we went through the process. We put in a new warehouse management system. That meant we put in scanning, we put in barcoding. We then, we had container management, which was fantastic. That meant customers could pre-order. If the container was delayed or there was a shipping problem, it became automated. We updated the delivery time on the system. The customer got an update straight away. We had seasonal stock levels, something I hadn't even thought of before. Of course, we're in the heating industry. There's going to be peaks and troughs. I don't want 4 or 5 containers arriving in July. I want my stock arriving pre-heating season, which is September. So that was great. We then were able to implement our monthly stock reviews. And what does that mean? We were able to assess what's moving, what's not moving. Are we holding too much stock? Should we put that on sale? So we manage those on a monthly basis. And the best thing ever, we were doing stock takes. We were able to do the stock takes on the automated system. It's a bit like, you know, when you go through Tesco's and you see people standing with their scanners? That's what we were doing. So there was no downtime. There was no more of this Christmas. There was no more paperwork. We could rely on the information. So this took a while to put in place. It didn't happen overnight. And we also had to change our full operating system so that we could implement these changes. But there were still problems. And there were supply chain problems. I just didn't know there were supply chain problems. So one day I was sitting having my lunch. And normally over my lunch break, I go onto the BBC News or I catch up on my emails. And there in one of my emails was the Invest NI newsletter. And I thought, okay, I'll give it a go. What's the worst thing that can happen? Somebody's going to come out and give me a bit of advice. So as Clive said, the process is really easy. It's online, it's easy, it's quick, and more importantly, it's free. So before I'd finished my lunch, I had my application done, and really quickly, my supply chain advisor was in contact with me, and a meeting was set up. Fantastic. So the supply chain advisor came out, and I'd like to say this was kind of the structure that we went through. It wasn't. It was like a therapy session. We sat down around the boardroom. I brought in people from the warehouse. I brought in people from the sales order processing. I brought in a selection of people. They were all coming to me with problems, but the core thing was the supply chain wasn't right. So we sat down and it was, as I say, it was very much like a therapy session. But there was a light bulb, because the supply chain advisor came with this wealth of knowledge. And we suddenly realized that the problems that we were having were not unique. They were just industry problems. And our advisor was able to label them. We had never really labeled them before, so we put them into categories. And suddenly, when you give something a name, you can kind of go, okay, we can find a solution. So our advisor prompted us with questions. Have you thought of, that's a communication problem, that's a quality problem. So literally, that was our diagnostics. That was our therapy session. And the advisor really grasped our business really, really quickly. And the thing that came out of it was, we had this fantastic growth strategy, and I've told you we did well. We're increasing our sales, but our supply chain process was not aligned with our growth strategy. And whilst we had some governances and some procedures in place, they weren't very robust and they weren't very good. So with that, we then decided we would literally roll up our sleeves. And that's why I've rolled up my sleeves today. They're still rolled up. And this is really just the start of the process. So we continued to bring that natural team together and sat down. And the thing about it was, we agreed that we would focus all of our efforts on our internal processes, had we got them right. So we identified gaps, opportunities. We gave the warehouse team the voice to say what their problems was. And with that, they were coming up with the solutions as well. We also brought in the sales team. So we quickly identified a list. That's basically all it was. We made a list and we said, these are going to be our improvements and this is how we're going to measure them, and we're going to hold ourselves accountable. And it started with me as senior director within the company. I got my shoulder behind it and said, this is what we're going to do. So I took on the whole supplier review, because I was the one that had the relationship with them. So we literally rolled up our sleeves, we got stuck in. Now, at that stage, we had a massive problem. We, as you know, we're in the stove and the fireplace industry. We buy from the other side of the world. And as I said, COVID broke us. And COVID broke our stove supplier. So in the middle of COVID, we had to find a new supplier, which really was not easy. There was a lot of frustration, a lot of we don't know what to do, and we were so far down a rabbit hole we couldn't get back out of that rabbit hole. So the advisor gave us the tools and the knowledge on how to renegotiate, how to put a plan in place. And we quickly had a prototype stove air freighted within 2 weeks. And I know you could probably go, well, why didn't you do that before? The thing about it is, we didn't think about it. We were so bogged down with having problems that we just didn't step back. So the supply chain advisor came in with these fresh eyes and said, what if you do this? So prototype was shipped over, put it in the trade counter. We looked at it, we tweaked it, we made some changes, and within a week, we had 4 containers ordered. The proudest moment I had was when I walked the supply chain advisor down into the trade counter. The stove was on display, but not only was the stove on display, we'd actually gained the confidence and the knowledge and the tools that we brought in beautiful brick chambers to go with it, and we brought in lovely wooden beams to go over the top, all without us having to go out and visit our supplier. So that really gave us the confidence. So we have rolled out several things within the company. As I said, we have brought the teams together and we aligned our procurement goals. I took on the suppliers, and how we decided on what suppliers needed reviews. We didn't carry out reviews at all, which seems madness, but we didn't. We then decided that I would contact the suppliers. We went through a list. We based them on turnover. Where's the biggest spend? But we also based it on where was the biggest problems. And we sat down and we strengthened that relationship, which is great, because what I have found is if you speak to your suppliers and you can deal with the issues are going to be resolved. And plus, you get to know your supplier. If they're really a good partner, they'll resolve those issues. But quite easily, lead times improved because there was communication. You were talking about things. So the lead times improved. We were renegotiating without really renegotiating because we were now looking at our stock levels and going, do we really need to bring in a 40-foot container? Can we bring in a 20-foot container? Let me ask the supplier. And the supplier would basically say, yes, Josephine, but you're not going to get that 7% discount. I'm only going to give you 3%. And I'm going, okay, cash flow, less turnover on the stock. I can turn that quickly. I will do. I'll work with that. We also, when working with our key suppliers, we started thinking, because yes, I'm dealing with suppliers, but in this industry, I'm a supplier. So we then started looking at our customers and going, we should not have to wait until our customers come to us. We're going to put a process in place and we're going to be the best supplier to our customers. So there was a two-prong attack. So that's what we do, and plus we reduce that new product to market cycle. We can bring a new product to the market on our doorstep with a prototype delivered here in less than 4 to 5 months, depending on the product. Fantastic. So what were the operational benefits? The staff morale went through the roof. They were being listened to, because for a while they were just coming up and giving me the problems, and I was going, I'll deal with it, and I'd write it down with all the best intentions in the world that I would deal with that. So morale went through the roof. The whole internal communication took on a life of its own, and I stand back in amazement sometimes. And it was actually on Monday I was in the office. I now have my warehouse team and my sales team communicate without me having really to tell them what to do anymore. And then I have my sales team saying, oh, on those clearance items, I've just sold 172 of those clearance items. I go, fantastic. That's 172 spots in my warehouse that are not going to be sitting dead space. I can bring in product that I'm going to turn. New job creations, which goes back to the support of Invest NI, and we're currently in the market for a supply chain worker, so it is advertised on Indeed if anyone is interested. I'd like to take that opportunity. We also then, we were getting really good quality information. We'd invested in our systems. So our system's now been in place 2 years. We know our trends, we know the history of what we're working with, and we can trust that information. So we now have really good quality information, and we can make business decisions on that. And one of those business decisions that we made was just literally last month. We have another fireplace supplier. And they're slightly more premium, and we would offer a bespoke service. Say you wanted a fireplace like Biden's fireplace in the White House. We can copy that for you, exact copy. But we weren't getting enough sales of the bespoke fireplace, so we were filling containers just for the sake of filling containers to keep some customers happy. So the warehouse manager came in and said, Josephine, do you know we have X product from this supplier sitting on our shelf for 2 years? And I went, no, that's ridiculous. So we put a process in place. We told our sales team, get it moved on. We then went to our second supplier, our fireplaces, and we asked the question, and it's a bit like Damien said, we weren't asking the right questions before with that original fireplace supplier. We said, Mr. Supplier, can you do bespoke? And he said, yes, we can. So now we have removed one supplier and we've combined it, and we have a quicker turnaround of product. So we've set our foundations. We've got our because I know I'm under pressure for time now, so I'm going to go quick. We have got our supplier reviews. We've implemented scorecards, and we have direct access to our suppliers, and we jointly we celebrate our successes with our suppliers as well as anything that is gone wrong. So the financial benefits, it's a no-brainer. I'm here as an operations director. My KPIs are the P&L of the company, and I'm held accountable to that. So we have reduced our stock holding. We've reduced our reorder levels. We've improved our stock turnover, and we have improved our cash flow. We've injected free cash into the company. So do we have an award-winning supply chain process? No. But if you ask me that in 2 years, I would say yes. And the reason is we're an award-winning company, and that's my award-winning team. Thank you.
So I'm Tom. I'm the operations manager at Sensotec, and today I'm just going to show you some pictures that show sort of behind the scenes of a small company in Belfast and a supply chain that really, for the past few years, has been fighting to survive, really, in a competitive and ever-changing market. So who are Sensotec? Sensotec started 8 years ago. I was going to say in this room on the left, but I think it was probably in my boss's kitchen. But the room on the left is really where the business started, and it's in Ormeau Business Park in Belfast in the gasworks. We make and we distribute sensors for machines. They're basically little plastic housing with a PCB inside, bunch of chips on it, and a magnetic base. And you stick it on your machine, and it kind of acts like a Fitbit for the machine. And the purpose is to elongate the life of the machine. It's predictive maintenance. It tells you what you're going to need to do to keep that machine running longer before anything happens. The purpose of the company is to provide a sustainable alternative to the industrial world. Today, we're about 50 employees globally, and we're selling into about 40 countries. And tomorrow, we're moving into the office on the right. So that gives you an idea of the kind of growth that we've experienced over the past 8 years. So what is it about, sorry, actually I should have stayed on that slide. So what is it basically about that journey and on my journey with Sensotec that's worth sharing today? Well, we're a growing company in Northern Ireland. And although, yes, we've grown and things look good, it's not all been smooth sailing, and it hasn't really happened without a couple of hiccups along the way. So if I stand up here today and maybe tell some of the small businesses some of the hiccups that we've experienced, then maybe some of you won't make the same mistakes that I did. So naturally, what I'm going to say is probably going to resonate more with the smaller businesses here today, and maybe people who are less experienced in supply chain. I'm not going to stand up here and tell the supply chain professionals of Northern Ireland how to suck eggs. I'm really only starting to learn that myself. But hopefully, just by listening to this, everyone can take something away from it, and maybe just even a wee reminder of the fundamentals. So when you think of a supply chain or a production line, hopefully it doesn't look like this. I started out actually as a mechanical engineer, and whenever I graduated from Queen's, I went to work at Schrader Electronics. So that's a Northern Irish company. Based in Antrim, they were making about 80 million sensors a year at the time whenever I joined. So super incredible company to work for. Amazingly established, working to all of the global design standards that you can possibly imagine, and selling basically to every car company you've ever heard of, every lorry company you've ever heard of. And just a truly amazing company to work for as a graduate mechanical design engineer. But they started with one employee, who just happens to be my dad, and it took them 30 years, to get to that point. They too started in a room like this, hand-built prototypes, sitting around a desk with a group of engineers, a bit sort of skunkworks type-esque thing, and still sold for $1 billion in 2015. So basically, this picture on the left shows Sensotech whenever I joined in around 2018. And I was kind of thinking, how on earth am I going to bridge the gap here between what we're doing today and really where we want to be and what I seen happening at Schrader. The target at the time was sort of get to around that 100,000 volume, that 100,000 sensors a year. And what you can see there, that was never going to be sustainable. So a big target like that, walking into a small company, that can be quite overwhelming, and that can be quite daunting. So how do you approach something like that? Well, it's pretty simple. You just break it down into tiny steps and you chip away at it bit by bit. World domination, it never happens overnight. Even if the sales team kind of tell you that it is going to happen overnight, it never really does. So you can relax a wee bit and take it step by step. So today, we're sort of doing in the region of 10 to 25,000 a year, or that's the forecast, or you could say basically 1,000 times what we were doing there. It's not just 1,000 of those tables now, thankfully. So in 2020, the volume was going up a little bit, and we decided we were going to start the operations team. So naturally, having absolutely no experience in the area and not knowing what a supply chain was, they decided that I would be the one to lead that team. The plan was grow the volumes, go global, build a global supply chain, get accredited to global engineering standards, and do it all from your living room, because it was the pandemic year, as we all know. At that time, my vision of a supply chain really was just seeing the millions of sensors come off the end of a production line in Schrader. And I thought really what would happen is I would just place the POs with my suppliers, and I would tell them the dates that I wanted them to arrive, and they would all just come in through the door, and everything would be hunky-dory. What I'd seen in Schrader really looked that easy. The reality was, I found out very quickly that I couldn't really get the components that I wanted. Just couldn't get them. It was a 2-year lead time for most of them. They were going to be a lot more expensive than I originally planned, and yeah, the lead times were going to be much more than expected. So I started to have a lot more respect for all the people who were working behind the scenes in Schrader that were kind of making that production line happen and making those sensors fly off the end of it. So I thought, well, when you think about the best companies in the world, what do they do in their supply chains? And things that I started to think about was, well, they far shore the components because it's cheaper. They manufacture their products maybe in cheaper countries as well because they can get better profit margins. And they'll run a lean manufacturing model just so they can have a just-in-time manufacturing model so that your business is more lean. The reality really of a small company that many of you have probably experienced is that you're going to have an unreliable sales pipeline. You're going to have fluctuating demand that you're going to have to deal with. You're undoubtedly going to, at some point, run into some quality issues. And when you try to respond to those quality issues, you're going to have some high lead times. And unfortunately, being a small company and being low volume, your buying power is probably going to be less than you'd like it to be. So it's going to be hard to negotiate. So what can you do? Well, one thing I would suggest is that you can make a supply chain that you're comfortable with. When you're at these low volumes and you're just getting started and your product is changing and your customer requirements are just being developed, don't spread yourself too thin. I have really, really good supplier in China, but I still have had quality issues with that supplier, and I didn't have a full team of people to ship out to China to sit by that supplier and fix those problems when they happened. And the reality was, it was really one email a day due to the time difference to get to the bottom of what was happening. And then once the root cause of the issue was found out and we knew how to fix it, I couldn't wait the 45 days, for the sea freight. So I ended up paying the $2,000 just to get the parts air freighted every time. So, how much did I really save there for those cheaper components? I guess the point that I'm trying to make just really is be careful who you choose, to be in your supply chain, because someday you might actually just have to go and visit them. Another point, just a quick one, is picking suppliers who you are going to matter to. Find companies that you have synergies with, maybe that you're similar size, that they're going to work hard for your business, and you and your vision are really going to matter to them and form a part of their vision as well. No matter how good your supply chain is, you might have the best suppliers in the world with the best procurement teams in the world, but it doesn't matter. They are not going to feel the weight of the risk and the impact of those risks occurring to your business. So you need to make sure that when you're placing the orders for your parts, you're not just walking away and expecting them to show up at some point. You really do have to manage your whole supply chain right down to a kind of component level, and you need to make sure that you know every component in your BOM, where it's coming from, what the latest update is on it, and whether or not they're going to be on time. Just to give you a wee bit of context, we don't manufacture our own products. We essentially buy components globally. We buy commodities from all over the world. We buy PCBs from China. We buy a lot of our bespoke mechanical components in Northern Ireland. We buy our packaging in Northern Ireland, and we do all of our manufacturing through contractors, which are in Northern Ireland. There's a lot of benefits there, but one thing I would say is that the manufacturers that are in this country, they are very experienced, and they can provide a really good kind of support network for you. And working closely with them and going down to see them and really experience what's happening on the production line is an incredible benefit that you don't get all the time if you do far shorter stuff. I would say that we are actually the ones who are causing most of the quality issues with them due to the youth and complexity of our products. I think boiling it all down, the main thing that I learned about supply chain over the past few years really is that it's actually just all about people. It really is just a chain of people. And in 2020, for us as a small business, that year was all about survival. It was just survive. We're a self-funded business. We weren't sitting on a bunch of VC money at the time or anything like that. And really what our goal was for that year was to survive and was to pay our employees' salary, not have them furloughed and not lay anybody off. And it became very clear very quickly that the supply chain was actually the lifeblood of the business at that time. So one thing that I did probably get right and that I did learn very quickly was that building relationships in the supply chain, internally and externally, was vital to that success. I would say that you need to make sure that your suppliers really, really understand just how important they are to you. You might be afraid of sharing with those suppliers the risk that lies on your business in their hands, but in my experience, you're only going to benefit from it. You should really be engaging with these suppliers, talking to them on a really regular basis and making them understand just how vital a part of your business that they are. Crises are always going to happen. Crisis happens every day in a small business. We've experienced probably every crisis I can possibly imagine. And it feels like failure, I suppose. And Damien said earlier, in the middle, everything looks like failure. Another quote that I quite like, actually, is that it's been said, that success is actually walking from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. And whether that's good or bad, that's honestly my kind of experience in bringing this small company, from small volume to high volume. So in 2020, one of these types of crisis was you're fighting big companies like BMW, Apple, Samsung for, you want 500 microchips and they're stopping their car production plants in Germany and buying car parks to fill it with cars with no microchips in them. So how on earth are you, as a small company in Belfast who no one's ever heard of, going to get your hands on those wee 500 microchips? The only way you're ever going to achieve that is by building relationships with those suppliers and knowing the people who work there. That's my advice to you. So a couple of years in, I guess, to running the supply chain and the ops team in Sensotech and getting through that kind of survival mode phase, I met InvestNI. I met Joe McVeigh, I met a couple other people, and I really started to, at that point then, engage with that supply chain resilience team and start to learn that kind of like what Josephine said, these problems that we were experiencing, they're real problems that happen to all businesses, and there are models, and there's training, and there's a lot of expertise behind it that can really help you get through it and bring your business to a more sustainable state, I would say. I went to some negotiation workshops. I met a lot of other companies in this country who were struggling with the same things that I was struggling with, who were having the same problems, and it was great even just to have, bounce those struggles off with those people, but also just to have a supply chain expert like Jo who I could talk to every couple of weeks and tell her what my strategy was and what my plan was, and just know that I was on the right tracks, and that other companies in this country were doing the same thing. The biggest help, of course, has been the Key Worker Grant. Having a dedicated member in supply chain, function is probably the biggest impact that we've had in our business. Bringing someone in who's dedicated to it, who has experience in it, and we could get them in a wee bit sooner than we probably could have afforded it, and afforded someone who has a bit more experience than maybe we could have afforded without the program. That to me has been a great benefit. So just to summarise, help's available there. Definitely you should reach out and ask for it. Supply chain needs to be a really strategic part of your business plan, and it needs to be integral right across the management of the whole business. You need to invest in good people, supply chain roles, but most importantly, build excellent relationships and strong partnerships in your supply chain, and communicate all the time with those suppliers, and don't forget to negotiate with them too. Just to leave you with one kind of final thought, now that I've got a wee bit of the supply chain strategy under my belt, and we've got the Key Worker in, and we've been working with Invest.NI for a couple of years now, we're thinking a wee bit more strategic, and I can think longer term and focus on the wider kind of ops strategy for the whole business. I've kind of come to learn that the most important lesson really is to try and take time to be proud of every step that you take. Try and celebrate every win, no matter how big or small it might seem at the time. When you're building a small company, you're writing your story with the people around you, and at the end of the day, what could be better than that? Okay, thank you.
Big thanks to Invest.NI for inviting me to speak today. Really appreciate it. And I think nearly on behalf of all Invest.NI clients here today, I'm extremely grateful for the support over the last years with Invest.NI, and I think the speakers before me are very considerate of that as well. So, my name is Louise Skeith. I'm the CEO of SDG. We're a company based in Armagh, and I belong to a family-run business, and I know it gets bad press, family-run business, but I'll give you a statistic. Just nearly 70% of all companies in Northern Ireland are run by families. So we must be doing something really good. It's a credit to the family working ethos that we have the ability to pass businesses from generation to generation. So yes, as I say, I'm a second generation CEO, and the chairperson, my father, is still in the business. He celebrated his 80th birthday in January this year. And family's at the heart of everything that we do. It's one of our values, core values of what we do well and how we do business. I have a background in science, so I am a nosy person. I just like to ask curious, awkward questions on a daily basis. And I have won a couple of awards here and there over the years. So I'm going to just have that's the brief content. So looking at challenges and existing and our strategy, linking support chain, the supply chain improvements that we have implemented into the business, and operations improvements, and the next steps. So I'll not keep you very long because I know the tea and coffee is starting to get poured down the back of the room. So who are we? Who is SDG? We are suppliers of essential components for every stage of construction. We supply specialist products to the construction industry. We've been doing it for over 34 years. We do it really well. 54% of our business is to the precast manufacturers in Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland and GB. Northern Ireland is extremely strong with precast manufacturers. It's where they shine. It's what they do really well. So we're project partners to precasters, main contractors, formworkers, dryliners, fit-out, self-builds, renovation contracts. We provide technical expertise and solutions to architects, QSs, civil, structural and consultant engineers across Ireland and the UK. And what we do well is our technical advice. We have people in the business that are in the business nearly 25 years, and they share their expertise in the business. So as I said, our journey to date, business was established by my father, Seamus, in 1990, and that's when the journey started. I came into the business in 2015, and then we started to restructure. Then we doubled the size of the business. So this is where we kind of looked at how we can do, we're doing stuff really well, we want to do it better and bigger. So we rebranded through the help and support of Invest NI. We went on the Design Active programme and then the Design Forward programme, and we rebranded and refocused the business. That was through a massive, again, a grant fund that we received from Invest NI, was looking at the strategy. We became very strategic about how we were actually going to bring the business on for the next 30 years. So we also looked at our value proposition, and we then, of course, COVID hit, as it did with everybody, but our industry was quite fortunate in the sense that we were still at 80% capacity the whole way through COVID. It hadn't a great impact on us because we were supplying to the construction industry, which kept the doors open throughout the whole COVID. So in 2020, we had 25 people in the business. And then we're looking at our growth strategies and our innovation, how we can buy better. Since 2020, we've had a lot of GB competition, and that really helped us to refocus on how we can do things better. What should we be doing? How can we combat the competition? And that's where I suppose I picked up the phone to the supply chain solutions team, and I have great support through Jimmy there, who's given us great help looking at our own supply chain. So the challenges that we had is customer service and experiences in the DNA of what we do. We do it really well. From the minute we get up, and I suppose Damien talked about it earlier on, we live, breathe and think about how we can do things better, faster, better for our customers. It's what we do. So our customers are at the heart of every decision. And I suppose we have monthly huddles, internal huddles in the business. And what we talk about is that SDG doesn't pay our people's salary. It's the customers that pay our people's salary. So our team are very conscientious of taking care and looking after our customers. So we have a very well-defined sales strategy and margin expectations. But we have inconsistent delivery performance from our supply chain, high inventory because of where our supply chain is sourced, and severe cost challenges from the market. Limiting success in addressing these issues was a bit of a challenge for us. So as I spoke about, getting looking at the severe cost challenges from the market, the GB market coming into the Northern Irish and Irish market has been something that we have been challenged with, but we've grasped the nettle with both hands, I think. So we reached out to Invest NI, and we, through their support programme, and they've reviewed our current strategy and processes. We analysed our data to identify root causes, developed an improvement plan with our supply chain, and supported and coached through mentoring delivery from Invest NI team. But a key thing is to link the purchasing strategy to the sales and operations. I suppose when you look at supply chain, the most important thing to do is to put as much light between what you buy something and from what you sell it is. The bigger that gap, the better the business will perform. So the better that we can actually source our supply, and every business we're all very sales driven. It's all about the metrics, about how we're performing. What was our numbers today? I think a lot of businesses kind of need to take a little step back and just really put some consideration around how we buy. Are we buying well? Look at the questions. Could we ask better questions from our supply team? And maybe looking at implementing a more strategic purchasing strategy that does sit along the sales strategy is key also. So what we looked at was, clear expectations from service levels of our suppliers, Purchasing, communicate minimum lead stock time. So we put in a digital stock system, which has really been a game changer in the business. It has helped us become leaner, better, smarter, quicker. Clarification of margin capabilities based on our current suppliers. Start sourcing at lower cost regions. So looking at and redeveloping and reaching out to a lower cost range closer to home geographically. And calculate required inventory levels with an agreed budget. Those are all things that you think you should be doing, but kind of like what previous speakers have spoken about, is that this is stuff that you don't naturally take for granted on a daily basis because you're always in the doing. Sometimes you have to take a step back, and I think that's where Invest NI really helps you support. They come in, take a wholesale review of what you're doing and how you can do the process better. So data analytics was something that has been a game changer for our business. We look at metrics, we're driven by metrics all the time. And I suppose if you were to really look at your budget, one of your biggest budgets in your company is your supply chain, what you're purchasing your goods at. And the bigger you can, we're all talking about margin, how we can sell better, smarter, how we can increase our margin in sales. The same has to go on the other hand for how we buy. Are we buying as well as we could do? Could we buy better? So the more data that we felt our plan was from a strategic point of view is the better, the more rich we had in data, the more quicker we could make strategic decisions for the business. So having been data rich, and we've done that through the elements of Power BI, which we have up on TVs all over the company, is that we were able to make decisions. We were able to make decisions very quickly. So that's something I think that we do really, really well. We're very agile at making decisions because we're small enough, but also big enough to move on and get stuff done. So the real-time on-demand reports, looking at our sales percentage margin, reviewing our forecasting, the data analytics platform, management insights. This empowers us to make decisions each day, every day, and especially we have a scorecard every Monday. And that's what helps us. So this is, if we're to look at the supply chain improvement actions, improve product availability and visibility. That's through our Power BI that we have introduced into the business. Inventory optimization, so increased turns. That's something that we've really focused on. And without the support of Invest NI and Jimmy coming into the business, something we never really looked at or engaged in. But having that, being empowered with that knowledge now helps us to be able to do business better. So we employ best practices, so looking at all our SOPs, make sure that we stick into the process. Introducing supply performance management for key suppliers. That's something probably in our latest strategic objectives for our procurement manager. That's something that he's KPI'd in the business on a weekly basis, how he's tracking that, how's he getting on with, who's he going to see, what is the outcome, what was the percentage measurement, which leads into the senior management-led KPIs. So from my point of view as a business, we're in a transition stage of trying to grow the business. We are an SME, but we have corporate visions of being a bigger version of what we can do in ROI UK and our home market of NI as well. So how we do that is through our weekly 90-minute scorecards that we hold every week. And the accountability, I suppose, is one of the key drivers of how we've game changed that for our business. So what we're trying to do, I suppose my previous slide was I'm a futuristic leader, and we're all about the future. It's all about the 1% of what we can do today, just 1% better, that can help us improve tomorrow. And I think that's something that everybody has that mindset in the business. Warehouse improvements have been drastic. We are based on an old dairy factory on the My Road, and it's not the best, it's not the sexiest of locations, but we have to manage with the location that we're in because it's a great location. So we're split over 3 separate warehouses, and our office is in a different part of the site as well. So trying to manage the expectations of what good looks like and trying to implement them to best practice was something that we really focused on, and Invest NI helped and supported us through that. So looking at inventory accuracy, we introduced cycle counting, which really wasn't being done. Implemented daily metrics, which is kind of like a mini scorecard for the warehousing and logistics team. optimising the warehouse into a daily schedule, making sure even to the simple process that kind of looking at how we actually plan where product sits in the warehouse and setting up cross-departmental improvement teams. That's something we kind of call them from time to time war rooms. So we'll pull people from different departments in and see how we can actually come up with better solutions. And that leaves us agile. We're always able to make decisions quickly because as a company, by having data at our fingertips, we're able to make decisions extremely quickly. So the results that we've received from engaging with Invest NI, we have improved our customer service because again we're allowed to, we have the ability to make decisions quickly, so we can pick up the phone and let them know, in real time, I suppose. Reduced inventory, we're not carrying as much stock, cash is king, having the cash to make other decisions, to reinvest back into our people or into our business. Better stock accuracy, our stock accuracy is 99% every week, week on week. Because we're agile, we're looking at it as a key metric in the business, and our head of operations, he lives and breathes it, so it doesn't get, he's accountable for it now, so that's probably what the difference is in the business. Efficient use of operational resources, and we're more able to respond to cost challenges in the business. So what we're trying to embed in the business is that we're setting ourselves up for growth. We have an ambition to 4x the business to where it is today. And that is a vision, and I suppose back to what was said earlier on and today with the presentation this morning, is that we have a clear purpose. We understand our vision. We know what we're going to do. We're just in the fight mode, I suppose. So this is an ongoing thing, and all leaders, I'm sure every one of you today would say the same. You always focus on what you're doing today, but you always have an eye on tomorrow. And I believe, especially in the industry that we work in, living and breathing within the construction industry, where we'd be classed as a stakeholder within that industry. So our future, and I think the future of every leader in this room today, is that it's incumbent on all of us to take a responsibility for sustainability. It's what's going to identify, hopefully through, with the changes within the scope of the economics for Northern Ireland. I think it's also incumbent of all of us to take on a responsibility of creating that sustainability, creating sustainable jobs within Northern Ireland. We create a better economy, a better standard of living for all of us to live in. So I've took that's to the heart of the core of what we do, and it's part of our vision of how we're going to do it. So we're very future focused on the carbon reduction and de-risking by sourcing locally. And that's something through the Supply Chain Resilience Fund that hopefully we're applying for that grant funding. And if we're successful, that's something that we'll be implementing in the next 12 months. It's already in our strategy. So what we're going to do, how we're going to go about that is we're looking at developing local restorative supply with alternative materials. I've already, through Innovate UK, I have a knowledge transfer graduate who started with the business in January, and that's all that they're going to be looking at, is researching and developing this market, see how we can supply and manufacture in this economy so that we can bring jobs, we can pay taxes, we can grow this economy so that the local economy in Northern Ireland can stand on its own 2 feet. And with that, a byproduct of that is reducing the carbon. In the construction industry, everything is about embodied carbon. So it's looking at scope 1, 2 and 3 and our ESG and our corporate responsibility. We all have a responsibility to de-risk our own environment. So by doing that and looking at the circular economy, seeing how we can source product closer to home is critical for how SDG is going to do the business in the future. So looking at better availability or visibility of availability, reducing inventory in the end-to-end supply chain, so looking at more local sources, improving quality and compliance through the ability to go on site regularly and audit local suppliers. I think everybody probably in the room, if you're sourcing product from the halfway across the world, it's very hard to secure your quality control. As well as, the sun, the moon and the stars would be promised, but you're in tentative hooks until that container comes in and you're actually testing and managing the stock inventory yourself. So I'm hoping that through looking at the circular economy in Northern Ireland that we have the capability of cost reductions by reducing that supply chain, taking on the responsibility of looking at globalisation for our children's future and for their children's future. We need to make changes today for tomorrow. And as leaders in all our businesses here, I think it's our responsibility to kind of stand up and make that change. So that's everything from me. The only other thing I would say is that, you know, we can give a man a food for a day, and I know this is an old ancient proverb, but if you teach a man to fish, he'll eat for the rest of his life. And I think that's how I envisage Invest NI. They give us the tools. And I think, I suppose, mostly with family-run businesses, we don't all have the skills of knowing finance or knowing procurement or knowing how to work logistics. And I think that's why we're extremely fortunate in Northern Ireland to have Invest NI on our doorstep, but also leaning into Invest NI and asking for that support, because they always come up trumps, they always come up with solutions, and I think they're a great support mechanism for a family-run business, but also for SMEs in Northern Ireland. Thank you.